Hello and welcome to this video. My name is Kate and I am the Managing Director of Therapy Therapy Tools to Thrive. We provide consultancy and membership coaching opportunities for families and educators of children with additional needs. This video is all about tactile sensitivities or tactile defensiveness. So I'm just going to talk through the most common symptoms, behaviours that I see as an occupational therapist working with children with tactile defensiveness, and then talking just through some strategies that you can implement to support any tactile defensiveness you might see in your child or students. So tactile sensitivity or defensiveness means they are much more sensitive and register that input much more than other children their age. And it can be really difficult to ignore and the brain to tune out from the input they are receiving. And if you think about it, anything on a day-to-day basis is a potential threat. So when we talk about tactile defensiveness, it is the touch to the skin. And everything we do touches our skin. So hair on our face, clothes on our skin, the feeling of the chair as we're sitting in the chair, anything, teeth brushing, anything like that, it all stimulates our tactile system. So quite often children who have tactile sensitivities begin their day in fight or flight, and they continue the high level of arousal and high levels of anxiety throughout the whole day because everything is potential overwhelm for their nervous system. So what we need to do is really recognize the tactile sensitivities and then really help the nervous system modulate the environmental and the sensory input that they get in order to successfully support them and be able to function on a day-to-day basis. So what are some of the common issues that I see as an OT? So one of the main ones is irritated by clothing and tags in their clothing. That is really common. So there may be children who resist changing their clothes because they like the sensation of the clothes that they've got on. They might want the tags cutting out, or they may just resist wearing different clothes. So it can be anything. And it's really difficult if you've got a child who resists wearing clothes, so they prefer just to kind of be semi-naked, or if you've got a child who will constantly want to wear the same clothes over and over again. As a parent, that can put pressure on you, and so it is difficult. So that's a common one. Hair cutting. So resistant hair cutting is another real common tactile sensitivity that you'll see, and another one is nail cutting. Nail cutting can always be a challenge for children with tactile sensitivities. It could be that in play, they don't want to be tickled because tickle is light touch. And light touch for these children or individuals can be perceived as painful. So what we need to do is give them touch that isn't perceived as painful to their nervous system. So they'll resist any kind of light touch sensation. So say, for example, any kind of play activities, maybe even in PE, they want to, PE can often be kind of like there's some contact there somewhere. So they won't engage and they'll resist engagement and demonstrate behaviours so they don't have to do PE, just to kind of resist the chances of being touched. It may be that they have difficulty standing in a line, and they may be quite avoidant of crowds. And again, that's because of that touch sensation. So they don't want to be touched. So they may put themselves right at the back of the line all the time, or they might like to walk with the teacher, so that they reduce the risk of being touched. They may be picky eaters. This is because of the sensation of the different textures of food in the mouth. And so they don't like certain food textures. And then this is due to their tactile sensitivities. During play, they may resist messy play, and they may not like to get their hands dirty, even if it's during meal times or anything like that. Tactile sensitivities, they can be really resistant of doing that. So it may be that during play activities or any arts and crafts or baking, you know, they don't want to get the hands dirty. It could be that they're hairbrushing, difficulty with hairbrushing, you know, that tactile sensitivity, and they may avoid affection. So that if you go over and give them a cuddle, they may react negatively to it. And that is obviously you're going to have an emotional response, you as a parent or an educator, but they resist the affection because it's unpredictable touch and they're not used to it. And depending on where they are in the classroom, you know, it could really affect their attention and concentration because they're in fight or flight mode. And if they're in a busy environment where lots of children are walking past them all the time, there is a chance that they're going to be touched. And so really their attention is really focusing on any kind of risk that happens to them rather than being able to pay attention on the work you've given to them. And then it could be difficulty wearing shoes. I often see that one, difficulties with socks and shoes. Again, that's tactile sensitivity. So in a classroom, it can be that sitting beside the children can also be a challenge because, you know, children, you know, they sprawl across the table and, you know, and they are not wanting to be touched. So, you know, that can also influence their ability to pay attention and concentration within the classroom. So those are some real common behaviours that I see. You know, these children often seek control. They like to be in control of the play. They like to be in control of the affection. And if they are in control, then they are happy to do it. So they may come up and cuddle you on their terms, or they may play with their siblings as long as they're in control of whatever they're doing. But if anything changes, then they'll resist or react negatively to that, because they're not in control. And that's because of the activation of the tactile system that isn't regulated and really is functioning in the fight or flight mode. When I say fight or flight, that means really high levels of arousal and really anxious. And anxiety is tiring. If you're anxious, you know, it can be draining mentally and physically. And so imagine feeling like that as soon as you wake up every day until the moment you go back to sleep. And that is why children seek control, because of their tactile system. So let's look at some simple strategies that you can use to try and help a child that you might have thought of as I've been explaining those behaviours that may demonstrate some tactile sensitivity. So we've got firm pressure touch. Like I said, light touch can be perceived as painful, but firm pressure touch is really calming and regulating. So if any kind of massage, that kind of pressure touch, any deep hugs, any real strong cuddles, that is calming and regulating for the nervous system. Anything with going in when you're in school or if you're in a crowd, try and go at the back so that, you know, the child is able to see the people that could potentially touch them. And it's the same for positioning a child in a classroom. If you're going to position a child in a classroom, position them in a place where there's not a lot of traffic going behind them, so there's less risk of being touched, just to help try and regulate that thought pattern and that nervous system so that there's less risk. So anywhere where there's crowds, lines, try and stay at the back, and anywhere in the classroom, try and position them so that they're less risk. Even if you're at home and you're in the dining table, you know, at home at the dining table, position them where maybe they're with a wall to their back, so that they can see the full environment. If they can see the full environment and touches can be predictable, then it is less anxiety provoking than if you come up behind and touch them. So that's another strategy. Don't approach them from behind or the side. Approach them from the front if you're going to make physical contact with them. I'm sorry, I'm just going to have a drink. My throat's gone really dry. So approach them from the front, but always warn them that you're going to touch them. So you might say, John, I'm just going to hold your hand now. Or John, can you hold my hand? So it's either, you're going to do it, or ask them to do it. If they're in control, they're going to be more likely to engage in it than not. So ask them, but always give that verbal warning regarding the touch prior to doing the touch itself. This just gives them a pre-warning. It just makes it a little bit more predictable, and they're able to prepare themselves for anything else that they've got going on. So any chewing and sucking can also be calming and regulating for the nervous system. So thick milkshakes, thick smoothies, sucking them through a straw, any chewing, anything chewy that you can think of. Let them chew. So that even sucking and playing a game, you've got balls in water, you've got a straw, you've got to suck the ball up, hold it and drop it into a bucket, something simple like that. Just that sucking and that motion, sucking motion can really help regulation. Any kind of heavy muscle work. So please check out our proprioceptive video all about proprioception, but any kind of proprioception, heavy muscle, using the muscles to do something. So it can be some physical exercise, it could be carrying something heavy, it could be pushing, it could be pulling, but anything regulating, and particularly if you know that you've got to go to a crowd, or you've got to go somewhere that's going to be busy, and the child's going to be heightened, do that kind of activity prior to going to that environment to try and regulate them and give them the verbal warning so that they know and they can prepare their nervous system and their cells ready for the environment that they're going to be moving into. Any kind of weighted strategies in relation to weighted blankets, weighted lap pads, you can get weighted hoodies, you can get weighted shoulder straps, anything weighted. But please be aware that if you do buy a weighted item, it has to be correct for the child's height and weight. So please be considerate of that. And we never recommend to use weighted equipment overnight. That's just due to the risk that it can potentially cause. So we always say use compression sheets if you want to use something during the night to really just provide that deep pressure whilst your child's in bed. So both weighted lap pads, weighted blankets during the day as part of a sensory schedule, before they're going to go out to somewhere where may potentially trigger their anxiety due to their tactile system. Use those effectively. It'll just help regulate, and it's more of a proactive strategy rather than a reactive strategy to help regulate them. There's also a technique called brushing, and I'm not going to go into that, but that is also a effective strategy for a lot of children. Some children don't tolerate the brushing technique, but there is a specialist brush that you can buy to do the brushing technique. So if you do want to explore that a little bit more, please feel free to email me at hello@therapyeasy.com or pop us a message on social media. But please be careful. It's not just kind of getting any brush and brushing their skin. Also, kind of just think about any extra time for transitions. That if you're going to go to a busy place, try and go before the crowd, or if it's in a school, before all the children come out of the classrooms. Wait until the end so that they're a little bit late, but still you're able to just manage that arousal level so that as they move to the next environment, that they can still function effectively. And because if they are really heightened during the transition to the next classroom, when they're in the next classroom, they're already going to be at a heightened state of arousal. So then within the classroom, it could cause higher level states of arousal. And the same that if you go into a supermarket or somewhere busy, again, it can be you're triggering that heightened state of arousal. So then something slight could happen. And although it doesn't seem huge, because our arousal is already high, we've tipped them into overwhelm. And that's when maybe a meltdown and something could happen. So we've got to try and keep that regulation. But as well, it's looking at just supporting the individual to be able to communicate effectively how they're feeling, and what strategies they feel that works well for them, so that they can ask personally, appropriately, and how to ask for personal space if somebody's a little bit too close to them, just to help that little bit of self-regulation. You know, if they're able to communicate that, you know, do you mind just giving me a little bit more personal space, then you can do so, and that is an effective strategy, rather than kind of avoiding that situation again, which is what some children do. You know, and then anything like visual schedules or anything visual that will give them some form of barrier. So it could be that in a classroom you might have a cushion for that child to sit on if you're going to read a story, so that that cushion is their space and nobody else goes near around the cushion, because that's their space. Or give everyone a cushion if you've got cushions, and give all students a cushion, and then they can all sit on their own cushion. And it's just that visual reminder that that's my space. You can also do it sat at a desk. You know, if you've got something where you can visually divide the desk, and say, right, this is Robert's space, and right, this is John's space, and you don't cross over into each of the spaces. It just gives that reassurance and that visual reminder that actually this is my space and I feel safe in this space. And that can really help regulation, and it can also help other children put some form of barrier in between any kind of contact, which will naturally lower arousal for the individual who's got tactile sensitivities. So I hope this has kind of been a little bit of insight for you in relation to a child experiencing tactile sensitivities or tactile defensiveness, and perhaps that you have thought about a child, or your child, the behaviours you see at home, and then there's some strategies there that you can implement or try and implement in order to really support the sensory nervous system. But please be reminded that not all systems work by themselves. So although there's a tactile sensitivity that you may be able to recognise, there's often 2 to 3 sensory systems that aren't working to modulate somebody's sensory needs, that will really help some support to modulate those. So if you would like to reach out to us, we do have assessments available across the UK. If you'd like some more information on those, just pop us a message at hello@therapeasy.com and we can book you in for a free consultation. And we also have lots of sensory strategies on our Fab Family membership. And we have programs, full therapeutic programs, as well as individual activity library based on sensory systems, being able to grade and adapt them in the home to support you whenever and wherever you need it. That's as well as some training. So everything is there for you. So I hope that you found this useful. Please comment on our Facebook or on wherever you're watching this. Let us know what highlight you've taken away, what strategy you're going to try, and please reach out if you want any more support. And thank you very much for watching.